Hi friends, you're receiving this video because you're either interested in joining our meditation gatherings or you're already a part of our meditation gatherings, in which case you can use this video as kind of a refresher of some of the things that we talk about on a regular basis. I'd like to share a little bit about what meditation means to me and where I'm coming from as a teacher of this work. A meditation practice itself is only one of the many components of an overall spiritual or self inquiry or interior practice or journey. In fact, in a moment, I'm going to share with you what I call the 5 basics. And as you'll see, I consider them as the basics of being human, the basics of getting through this human experience with as little suffering as possible, with as much joy and freedom and liberation as possible. Seen from that perspective, it's not some kind of special, unattainable, unreachable spiritual ideal reserved only for a few elite. It does require commitment in the same way that in anything on the exterior world that you want to succeed in requires commitment as well in business or some physical activity. In the same way, this interior journey or lifestyle requires commitment, but it's also very tailored and customized to you by your deeper wisdom or higher intelligence or however you want to call it. But these basics are the basics not only of the spiritual slash self-inquiry slash interior journey, but also, in my opinion, the basics of being human. As we go through the basics, you'll see, wouldn't it have been amazing if we were all taught these basics from a young age in kindergarten, rather than just A is apple, B is ball, this is red, this is blue. Those are, of course, important in the exterior world, but there's a whole interior vocabulary and alphabet and terrain that I'm inviting you to explore. Meditation and all of the things that it contains for me and that I teach you guys on a regular basis and reiterate as much as possible, first and always requires an amount of work. In addition to the commitment, to the dedication, eventually the work becomes easy and kind of second nature, or even first nature, if you will. But to begin with, it's kind of like, I like to use an analogy of a garden. You get a plot of earth that's very hard and dry and cracked with a bunch of weeds and brambles and wild overgrowth that you have to clear away, and you have to do some tilling before you plant the seeds and then water the seeds and let the sunlight come. And then guess what? Eventually, with some luck and some prayers and some commitment, the flowers grow. Along the way, weeding is necessary as well. Returning to your practice, returning to your practice, returning to your practice. But at first, especially, do not get discouraged at the kind of intense commitment that's required, because a part of this journey is reconditioning and deconstructing all the ways that we have grown up in our culture that is obsessed with and prioritizes the exterior to the detriment of the interior. So at first, it may feel like chaos. It may feel like I can't do it. But as you feel and notice and see little glimpses, little glimpses, little glimpses, I like to call these kind of the embers. Stay with the ember. Blow on the ember. Fan the flame until it grows and grows and grows. So meditation and the whole interior journey is both one of healing, true, deep, transformational healing of all past wounds, psycho-spiritual wounds, if you will, aka samskara, as they call it in Sanskrit. And that word is where we get our English word scar from. Not only that, but once the weeds are mostly pulled, once the soil is mostly tilled, once the seeds are planted and the growth starts to occur, then true liberation, true freedom, true union with yourself, all objects and beings, as well as God or whatever ultimate transcendent reality you relate to. So meditation for me, and this is why a video like this is important, especially for new folks wanting to join the group and the vibe that we have going, is because if you ask 10 different teachers, especially in our town, what is meditation? What's the interior journey all about? Why even do it? What's the technique I should use? You would get 10 different answers, and they would all probably each be right, but at the same time different. And so what we have cultivated at Cultivated Healing is a particular vibe. And though I don't have an agenda to get followers or to get a room full of people or anything like that, I have always known that one day I would be doing what I'm doing now. And there is a momentum picking up. I do truly want to share what I've learned, to show what I've seen, and to relay what I continue to work on, what I continue to discover. I am never finished, and at the same time, I'm always already perfect, just as you are. So it's important to define some terms. What do I mean by ego? What do I mean by meditation? What do I mean by interior journey? What do I mean by liberation? What do I mean by wounds? What do I mean by self? What do I mean by non-duality? What do I mean by the witness? What are the basics for me? I feel as though I've kind of chopped my way through my own wilderness, and some of you guys are coming along to be shown what I've found myself. And that's amazing. Stay with me as long as you like, and then eventually go on your own little trails and come back and show me what you've seen. But it's a whole interior landscape, in the same way as we might go on a field trip to a national park or go camping in the wilderness, and I'm playing the role as your guide for now. For I myself have been on this interior journey in one way or another since I was 7 years old, when a very profound and still quite mysterious occurrence happened to me that at the same time kind of restarted, reactivated a flame of intensity and passion and commitment and longing and desire for this union with, as the Christian contemplatives say, the beloved, God the beloved, the ultimate reality as the beloved. or coming home to myself. At the same time as that happened, because of the intensity of that experience, I also developed obsessive compulsive disorder and was diagnosed and heavily medicated for the next 15 years until eventually I learned meditation, took myself off of medication, and have loosened the knot of that over-identification with a diagnosis. I still deal with it on a regular daily basis, but it's nowhere near intense, and I will never need medication again. So healing of wounds, cultural wounds, religious wounds, parental wounds, human wounds just of being here, existential wounds, heartbreak wounds, emotional wounds, mental wounds. And also, once those weeds are pulled and once the growth has happened, in the New Testament, St. Paul calls it the fruits of the Spirit. The Spirit meaning the interior work, fruit meaning the result of the growth. So what is a fruit like an apple or an orange? But the result of a lot of hard work, either by a gardener or by Mother Nature, to eventually grow this plant or this tree to full bloom. And here's the very natural, that's the point, the natural fruit. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And taken out of the dogmatic context and whatever wounds you may have about the New Testament or St. Paul, those, if someone were to tell you this is what you can get from doing the interior work, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, wouldn't that sound amazing? Natural growth in yourself and towards others. And in Sanskrit, the word Satchidananda means being, consciousness, bliss. So the result of the work is pure beingness, pure consciousness, pure bliss. Not as an emotional state, but as a quality of being itself. Similarly, in the Tao Te Ching, then you will become kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king, amused, disinterested. There are a few others that are not coming to my mind right now. Each separate being in the universe returns to the common source. Forgetting the common source is the cause of suffering. But if you remember the common source, remembering where you came from, then you will become naturally amused, disinterested, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king. And when death comes, you will be ready. So all the traditions have some version of this. I unapologetically resonate very deeply with the contemplative Christian tradition, not the dogmatic, institutionalized Christian tradition, and very unapologetically and authentically have a deep connection with Jesus. And many people have told me that I have been able to kind of restore their understanding of Jesus because of my own personal connection and because of my academic and scholarly training in school. and my own personal studies that I've done for myself. But I don't only use Christian, I don't only use the word God, I don't only use the Bible. I'm very trained in the Eastern traditions as well, meditation and yoga, etc. But all of the exoteric traditions or the exterior versions that have the doctrines and the dogma and the institution all have a correlate on the esoteric or initiatory or interior. So Judaism has the Kabbalah, Christianity has the contemplative Christian, Buddhism has Zen, Hinduism has yoga, Islam has Sufism. And all of the interior traditions are kind of saying the same thing, just in their own language and worldview and use of images. They're all saying that there's a way out of suffering. They're all saying that there's a true way of healing. They're all saying that there is a way to be fully enlightened and liberated in this lifetime. All the exterior versions are kind of clashing and at odds, and it doesn't really matter what they're saying from the perspective of the interior, because the interior is the experiential one. And so I draw on a lot of these traditions and images, have assimilated, ingested, digested, integrated them into my being, plus added my own flavor to them. There was a scientist that said, if I look further, then it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. I feel the same way. I'm standing on the shoulders of many giants before, and as I deliver and teach this material to you guys based on what I see on their shoulders, you can then stand on my shoulders and see further too, and everyone who comes after me. That's what it's all about. So here are the basics. Just going to hold this in front of the screen for a moment so you can take a look. You can pause it if you like, and then I'm going to come back and talk about them. Bye. So, in the same way that my approach to this work or to a meditation practice is not just to calm the mind, because calming of the mind may and will eventually come and be a natural byproduct. But at first, like I said, when you first go in here to the interior zone that you have otherwise probably been ignoring or suppressing or didn't even know existed, it might be very loud and chaotic at first, actually, before the peace comes. In the same way as tilling the garden, my favorite worship singer, Jason Upton, says, there's not going to be a garden unless some hands are bleeding. That might be an extreme image for some of you, but that's pretty amazing. Unless your hands get dirty, gloves or no gloves, there's not going to be a garden. Tools or no tools, power equipment or manual, doesn't matter. There's not going to be a garden unless you do the work. So similarly, pulling the weeds is a prerequisite to freedom and liberation, the fruits of the Spirit. Also, going through the kind of chaotic muck of the thoughts that are our conditioned way of thinking before the calm or peace of mind comes. And then the true liberation is so much better than even a quiet mind anyway, that eventually that Satchidananda, fruits of the Spirit, that pure beingness, pure awareness, pure oneness, far outweighs any kind of clutter of the mind anyway. But so it would be okay if it were still there, but the mind does eventually quiet down. So sometimes people give up right at the beginning of the journey because they don't have a teacher that's warning them of this, that's letting them know here are the steps along the way, here are the hurdles you're going to have to cross. And they give up before they give it a chance because it got really intense. Like the guy on the show Alone, which is a show about exterior survival mode, where they can stay out there in the wilderness and survive by themselves for 80 plus days. But the one guy tapped out on day 3 because he couldn't stay inside of his tent while it was raining outside because he couldn't be with his thoughts. He was afraid. He was feeling guilty that he left his wife at home. He was thinking about all of this stuff from his past and didn't have something to distract him, didn't have his iPhone, didn't have a video game, didn't have his TV. So if you can wait it out past some of these very well mapped out parts of the journey that I'm telling you about ahead of time, then the results and the benefit and the beauty and the liberation and the healing is worth everything. And so, though I've been on this journey and I share details with you guys here and there, it's not about me or about my story, but I do like to give you context of where I've come from. I've been on this spiritual quest or journey since I was a kid. But I learned to meditate about the same time as I started yoga, about 11 years ago now. And it changed my life. And that's when the deep work started happening, because when I was raised in the Baptist church, it was basically just behave better, believe stronger, pray harder. None of that worked. None of that helped. My burning desire for God was still there, and connection with Jesus was still there, but I was not given practicas. I was not given practices or practical ways to do the true, deep, healing, transformative work. That's what I'm offering you, because I've found it for myself and I can't hold it inside. So one of the prerequisites or one of the components, I don't know any other way. You can't just think your way out of it. That's part of it, thinking, yes. You can't just journal your way out of it. That's part of it, yes. You can't just go to therapy or counseling or let another person do it for you. That's part of it, yes. That's why we're doing this together. But you have to commit to the work. So of these basics, number one, I don't know any other way to say it. I don't know this work without it, is a meditation practice. Now, in the past 10 or 11 years, I have learned and practiced and taught many different styles of meditation. Kind of your basic ones. Centering prayer was a big one for me. Different mantra techniques or Eastern Buddhist yoga techniques, watching the breath, different things like that. And those are all good. But just a few months ago, a new kind of technique started very naturally and spontaneously happening in my practice. That on the one hand, nobody ever explicitly taught me. And at the same time, you can see components and flavors of all the things I've been taught along the way. So again, it's kind of an assimilation, ingestion, digestion of all I've been taught, plus my spin on it. And so at the same time, I can't claim that I'm making it up. It did literally just start happening in my practice, and I just wrote it down, and then step by step by step, it has a nice kind of 4-phase progression that I'm then teaching you guys. That's the only technique I'm teaching now because it has so much in it and so much room to explore and play and discover for yourself. It's not rigid. You have to do this one thing, kind of like the other ones are. On the other hand, I don't claim to have been downloaded by some aliens and angels or anything like that. Although, who knows, that could be happening as well. It doesn't matter. I'm just delivering it to you, and I'm developing it and discovering it myself just as fast as I teach it. I learn it just as fast as I learn it. I teach it. So, whether you've come to my Thursday night community meditation, which that's what I'm teaching there, or whether you're already a part of the group, or if you're brand new, then I'm giving you the recording of it. Everyone that's a part of the meditation gatherings is practicing this technique or one that's better. And I don't mean that in some sort of challenge way. If you can't do mine, then you better find one that's better. But regardless, find a technique that can do a similar thing. I'm calling it the unnamed Kalyana meditation method. Excuse me. A technique that can, one, consciously and intentionally turn off your regular daily waking thinking self and trip you into another realm, but consciously, without losing consciousness and falling asleep. And at the same time, it's not just going on a vision quest or imagination land, or like imagine a waterfall and go over to the door and see what you see there. That can be part of it, but that can also be confiscated by the ego, by the normal thinking self, thinking that you're in another mode and you're really not. It's still more thinking, it's still more you. So a technique that can trip you into another mode, another zone, another state of consciousness. And number two, very importantly, that you can mindfully and consciously take yourself through all of the regular states of consciousness or brainwave states that we go through every 24-hour period anyway. So mindfulness in waking, mindfulness in dreaming or the subtle realm or theta brainwaves, mindfulness or consciousness in deep dreamless sleep or the void or the causal realm or delta brainwaves, and mindfulness in the witness and mindfulness in non-duality. Witness and non-dual are kind of in the same category because they're always already the case and not states to get into, but at the same time, it requires your consciousness, conscious participation, conscious awareness that they are always already happening. Otherwise, they are always already happening, you're just not aware of it. So those of you who are practicing the unnamed Kalyana meditation method will notice that phase by phase by phase goes through all of those ones. So first, autopilot or idle mode is the normal waking consciousness, but you can bring conscious awareness to it. and then you can consciously turn that off. The next phase, open your sensory awareness to the phenomenal world. As you're relaxing, again, that can also be normal waking consciousness as you're hearing sounds, beta brain waves, as you're seeing colors and images and feeling sensations. But as you move deeper into a meditative state, it kind of becomes the dream world or the subtle realm or theta brain waves, because the sound of the car starts to be experienced as a wave that you can see. When I first started meditating, when I first learned, I had one of the coolest experiences to date. I had not had anything like this happen before, where I was very aware, but I was also not in normal waking consciousness mode. In front of me was this kind of deep, endless, black body of water, old black water, that anytime there was a sound, whether in the room, like someone coughing, I remember, or a car going down the road outside, it would make this ripple wave across the water. So like, or whatever it was. So this starts to push our phenomenal world of gross, dense matter into the dream state. And then similarly, deep dreamless sleep or the void or the causal realm or delta waves, you can maintain consciousness there. And that's sort of the phase 3 of my technique, going beyond the body, mind, or the phenomenal world. Could you just imagine if you maintained awareness during that period of night, every night, where it kind of goes blank? No body, no mind, no story, no bed, no sleep, no dreams, no images. And yet something maintains awareness to wake up in the morning and remember that blank void. So similarly, you can do that consciously on the meditation cushion. And some people claim to eventually, after they've meditated for a long time, to be able to maintain that consciously through the night. That doesn't happen to me, but I am able to pull that deep dreamless realm into my meditative state, maintain consciousness, and what I call it is, or how I describe it is, pure presence, aware of nothing. Can you imagine that, at least in kind of a morphogenetic field, to pull you there eventually one day too? Pure presence, aware of nothing. And in a very subtle way, the nothing itself is a thing. There's still, as long as we're in the dualistic realm, there's pure presence, aware of nothing as a thing. But still, it's nothing. It's really profound. In the meditation posture and experience, there's no feeling of a body. The head could be dropped, but it feels like, or it doesn't even, there's no head. The head could be dropped, and the only reason you know the head's dropped is because you come out of it and lift, and the head lifts, and you re-inhabit where you once were gone. Christy tells a funny story about when I was one time in that realm and kind of like doing like this, but I had no idea. It was just because Kemper was gone, ego was gone, thoughts were gone, but the body was still responding to gravity and muscles relaxing. But I was very unaware that the body was doing that. I was just in nothingness in such a profound way. Profound because there's an undeniable sense of presence. Undeniable that I am. Not I am Kemper, but I am. And then Kemper re-inhabits from that place, or gets re-inhabited from that place. And then the two eventually start to make their way into this interesting oneness dance. In any case, then there goes the final phase of the Kalyana method of who's doing all this? Who is it? What's the texture of yourself that's been doing this whole technique? Don't take that for granted. And then the whole kind of non-dual version of integrating the two, and further we go. In any case, find a meditation technique where you can consciously take yourself into another realm and go through all of the states of consciousness mindfully. In addition, this is one of the surest ways of doing the deep psycho-spiritual healing that I'm talking about. Because typically, the personality self that you call your name is kind of guarding the gates to accessing all of the unresolved samskara, scars, wounds, trauma, drama beneath the surface. I call it trauma and drama to indicate trauma being particularly negative experiences and drama being particularly positive experiences. Everything that ever happens to you needs to eventually be processed through every layer of your system: physiological, mental, nervous system, emotional, spiritual, all of it. Muscle tissue, joints, blood flow, etc. Inside and outside mirroring each other. I'm going to fix this blind real quick. Hold on. Okay. And so, especially if it's a particularly negative, traumatic, or particularly positive, dramatic event, those are not so easily processed at the speed at which they're happening. So usually they create these little, what I call nexus knots, these little balls of unresolution that also have ripples through every layer. There's a physical component in the fascia and muscle tissue. There's an energetic component in the chakras and the layers of the energy field. There's a mental component. There's a spiritual component that maybe we could call karma. It keeps repeating until it's resolved. And the ego, I'm not going to get into the ego too much in this video, but the ego is that principle or that entity. It's not exactly an entity the way I see it. It's more of a principle of separation, or a principle of operating out of lack, need, or fear, or attack defense. It will latch on to any of these unresolved issues or nexus knots and make it into what Ken Wilber calls a subpersonality. So beneath the personality on the surface that's usually guarding the gates to these subpersonalities, beneath that are each one of these, and the ego can confiscate it, can hijack it, kind of like a virus on a host. And if it was particularly traumatic, then that subpersonality will kind of take over your entire being, especially when it gets triggered, and manipulate the world to make sure that event never happens again. And notice the suffering in that. Even if that event never happens again, there's suffering and contraction in making sure it doesn't. In a dramatic event, particularly positive, that's not fully processed, the ego can make a subpersonality out of that as well and manipulate the world to make sure that it does happen again or it always happens. It's attachment, non-attachment, addiction, aversion, attraction, aversion. And notice again the drop of suffering in that. Even if you always get that thing again, part of you feels happy, just like the part of you feels happy that that thing's not happening. Part of you feels happy to keep getting that pleasure center activated, but there's great suffering in the manipulation of the world to make sure it happens. So eventually, non-attachment doesn't mean a bland, lifeless reality. It means not having to manipulate the world. Not having that one drop of suffering in attraction and one drop of suffering in aversion. So through a meditation practice plus all of these other techniques and the basics, these nexus knots, plus a yoga practice is very important too. Particularly one that understands deep therapeutic healing work and not just stretching or doing circus tricks. Eventually, because a meditation practice peels back that surface layer of the regular personality, and persona in Greek itself, the word means mask. It's the word they used for the like Greek tragedies, traumas and dramas on the stage where they would hold the mask up. That was a persona. So whoever first used the word persona in English to mean the personality knew what they were talking about. It's a mask. It's not only a mask to cover up each of these sub-masks to make sure they stay suppressed and stay activated, because the ego has also hired the personality to help it out, but it's also a mask over the true self. The mask over your deepest sense of beingness, which is beyond persona or subpersona. So in a meditation practice, this mask is taken off and all of these other masks rise to the surface to be seen and themselves taken off. But through that process, it might be quite intense. If you have a particularly unresolved nexus knot where you were badly abused by a partner or a parent or even the church or a religion, then all of the feelings of being a victim, sadness, confusion, resentment, and bursts of anger and rage can be there, right there at the surface. These things are draining your energy anyway, and you're operating out of them blindly anyway. So ignoring them and suppressing them does not make them go away. They have to be worked out eventually, this life or another life. And they will serve as magnets to magnetize experiences that reinforce them, because they need permission to keep their hold. And we continue giving them permission to do so as we magnetize those experiences on the exterior. So a little kind of interesting rhyme scheme that came to me one day in regards to yoga practice applies here as well. You have to peel back the layers to reveal the unresolution and feel it fully in order to heal it. Peel, reveal, feel, heal. And a meditation practice is one necessary component for that. And all of this healing stuff that I'm talking about now is the weeding of the garden. We're not even talking about liberation. Liberation is the natural result when the weeds are gone. I had one of my students say one time, "Oh, I think the liberation is just the space that's left after the junk is cleared from it." Exactly. The space is freedom. The space is you. And there's a whole process. When the ego starts to get challenged, it will definitely fight back. There's a dark night process. In the Christian contemplative tradition, it's called dark night of the soul. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras tradition, it's called pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses, going beyond the conditioning that you've always been operating from. And there's a whole, I hesitate to use the word battle, but there's a whole struggle that ensues where the ego is challenging you, you're challenging the ego, and God or higher self, deeper self, true self is assisting, but is also kind of standing back to see how committed you are. And a willingness is really all that's required. A true willingness and some guts and some intelligence and some commitment and some fierce diving deep. Christy actually gave the analogy of a train or a freight train. It's like it's been getting all of this steam your whole life, or however many lives you've just been doing it. And it requires, think of what it requires to stop a speeding freight train. So this is what we're doing here, is like grinding, sparks flying, stopping a freight train like Neo in the Matrix, stopping the bullets. And then not only that, and then putting it in reverse, getting the momentum going in the now right way. Think if you thought you were going in the right direction on a freight train, but really it was going in reverse the whole time, and now we're going in the right direction. Because the conditioning that we're given in this kind of matrix world is exact opposite of what we're doing here. So I understand it takes time. That's why I'm supporting you guys with these videos. I'm not going to spend that much time on all the other 4 because I'm kind of saying it all just as we go. But number 2, kind of what we're saying is to take responsibility or to do some shadow work. So every amount of suffering that it seems like someone else is bringing to you is really coming from yourself. Initially anyway, that's called projection. As we'll see, there's nothing outside of your awareness anyway. The koan that I like to use is within, without, without. So everything is within, without a without. So like the movie Inception, where everyone arising in the dreamer's experience was an aspect of that person's subconscious come to interact with them, or to test them, or to take them deeper, or to invite them to wake up, to see it like a glitch in the matrix. These are great movies I would invite you to watch. The Matrix and Inception. One of you guys actually said that you watched The Matrix for the first time the other day and would like a more feminine version of it with the same concepts, but without so much violence. That would be really cool. I'd like that as well. But they're great concepts for what we're talking about. So since this is arising in your awareness, reflecting back to you what you already believe about yourself anyway, then the invitation is to take responsibility, to notice everything that bothers you about another person, everything that you think another person is doing to you is really a reflection of something that you're doing to yourself. And we can get deeper into this, and we will get deeper into this. But it's taking responsibility, not just in like an argument that you have with your partner or whatever, and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have said that. That's part of it. But you can also say, oh, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have said that, just to make peace and avoid fighting. Meanwhile, the pattern is still in there. So taking responsibility is, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Here's my part in it, and here's why I said that. Here's why I believe that you were coming at me like that, because I actually have an insecure part of myself, and that was triggered by that. Or I actually have a guilty complex, and I think that everything's my fault. So I magnetized a situation in which I thought you were mad at me, but really I was mad at myself because I believe that everything's my fault. Do you know why that came out so easily? Because that's one of mine. One thing that happens here. So taking responsibility and meditating to resolve those unresolution points, then disidentifying from the ego that's been choke holding them and making them into subpersonalities. Then you're less triggered. Then if you are triggered, you can take responsibility and not blame someone else first. You can still have a conversation. If you're in partnership, you can still have conversation. You don't have to play victim. Play victim about your victimization. You can still take responsibility and then have a conversation. Oh yeah, when you say this, this happens and it makes me feel this, and whatever. It's an ongoing living communication. But first and foremost, resolve that, and then you'll probably stop magnetizing it over and over and over again just to reinforce its existence in yourself. So taking responsibility, doing shadow work, which naturally happens during meditation. As I'm saying, these subpersonalities come to the surface, and you might start to feel bursts of these emotions from long ago, bursts of grief, bursts of sadness, bursts of rage, bursts of fear that you don't know where they're coming from, either in your 20-minute sitting. By the way, the more you can practice meditation, the better. 20 to 30 minutes. But don't let any of it cause force or strain. It's more important that you kind of commit to a regular practice. And that's important in our time these days when nobody likes to commit to anything. And we all think, commitment means like being too rigid, or you can't tell me what to do or something like that. But if you commit to 3 days a week for 20 minutes at a time, then eventually that'll come 30 minutes. Eventually that'll become 4 days a week, eventually 5 days a week. And you'll get to see that the more the better, and you start to develop this kind of reservoir of awareness and presence and peace and non-reactivity to draw from, and that naturally starts to happen. And we'll talk more about what shadow work means. There's a particular concept that I have when I say shadow work, but for now, just take responsibility and shadow work. And then 3 and 4 kind of go together, but they're also their own things. So continually asking the question, and notice this is like on the fly, on a daily basis, in traffic, eating dinner, sleeping, going to bed at night, brushing your teeth, in meditation, out of meditation, all of it. It's a lifestyle, but without rules. It's a new focus of your attention to the interior, to this whole world, to this new terrain. So constantly asking the question, who am I? And if any conceptual answer comes, that's not the answer. But at the same time, just like in the meditation technique, when you ask, who's been doing this? And because you've dropped down through different phases and different brainwave states, you know that who I am is not the body, or is not just the mind in a linear thinking sort of way. So the sense of self changes. The sense of self that's aware of the waking world, the sense of self that's aware of the dreams, the sense of self that's aware of the void, the sense of self that's even aware of the self or the witness, the sense of self that's aware of non-duality. Who are you? And if a conceptual answer comes, don't believe it. Whatever does come as an answer or as a response or as a texture, a fabric, a feeling of I, even that might not be the final answer. That could deepen. It could be just the self that's aware of the world space you're in right now. So it deepens. Who am I? I am not who I thought I was. I had someone that I initiated into the technique, and when I asked that question, and then we came out and reflected on it, and I asked, how to go, he said, when you said, ask yourself who's been doing this, it was scary because I didn't recognize that one, but I knew it was me. Right? Because we're so conditioned to believe that we are whatever, our name, our career, our familial role, our body. When we see, okay, yes, I am that, but I am not, or that's a part of me, but I'm more also. There's a space created, and in that space, if you're not ready for it, it can feel a little disorienting, but the disorientation also can be liberating and fun and interesting and like, whoa. And then there's a reorienting. Oh, hello, this is your hello self, meet your new self, disorienting and reorienting. And it's always a vaster sense of self. So who am I? 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 Number 4, the ultimates. So in all the traditions, especially Zen Buddhism and Patanjali's Yoga Sutras paths, they have multiple names for enlightenment or the ultimate state. It's not just one thing, and it's not static either. It's experienced and expressed differently, even though the ultimate itself is ultimate because it's unchanging, as opposed to the relative that is changing or knows itself only in comparison to its opposite. The ultimate just knows itself as itself, self-confirming, self-affirming, not in relation to the opposite. But conceptually right now, you understand it in relation to the opposite, which is relative, but it doesn't need to know the relative in order to know itself. in the way that in the relative concepts know themselves somewhere on the spectrum of the relative and the changing. So there are many different experiences of the ultimate. It's not just one. So ultimate union with all that is, ultimate union with the transcendent, ultimate union with yourself, ultimate present moment, ultimate presence, ultimate beingness. For example, relative beingness is I am this, not that. I am a human, not a plant, relatively. I am Kemper, not Christy. But in twin flame world, that's questionable too. But I amness in an ultimate sense, the question is, or the invitation or the challenge is, right now, on the count of 3, make yourself not be. 1, 2, 3. Stop being. And those are the ultimate realizations. You have never been aware from anything other than your pure awareness. Relatively, you can take the perspective of another person and imagine what it's like to be another person. Relatively, you can take the perspective of yourself. But ultimately, you have never been aware of anything outside of your awareness. And not just your awareness as a person or a body, mind, or an ego. Your awareness as awareness. These are the ultimates. So continuing to go back to that well, so to speak, and refresh yourself in ultimate realities, not relative. Ultimate means always already there. So ultimate awareness is not like relative attention span. You can be attentive here and then here, and when I'm attentive here, then I'm not attentive there, and when I'm attentive there, I'm not attentive here. That's relative. And that kind of attention itself can come and go and can be and not be. You can be distracted or focused. In an ultimate sense, awareness itself, you cannot make it be or not be. You cannot make it increase or decrease. You can remove everything that's not it. You can get yourself out of the way. You can get the ego out of the way. But then, just as my student said, then awareness is just what's already there when everything else goes. And you look at these ultimates, and they're always already there. You, the consciousness, the mindfulness, just wasn't there. But also, paradoxically, it was. Wow. Again, basics of being human. I wish I learned this stuff in kindergarten, but at the same time, I wouldn't have had to go on this journey that I've been on that I love so much, to bring you guys along too. It's a whole other way of seeing things. It's a whole other way of being human. It does make your exterior life better, more easy, smoother. You can be more present, more yourself in the grocery line or at work or with your boss or your partner or interacting. But it's also a whole world in and of itself. Don't prioritize the exterior as the real world. Okay, I meditated, now back to life. No, it's a whole domain. As important, and I might argue more important than the exterior, because we let go of this one day anyway. And I would surmise that what we keep is what we've cultivated and developed in the interior while we're here. So are we interior infants or interior grown-ups? Interior infants or interior warriors, sages, masters? That might be where we pick up where we left off the next life. I think I picked up when I was 7 where I left off last life. I just came back on. I only got to be a kid for a few years. If that. And so all of this is not just conceptual, but my concepts are priming the pump for you. And I'm saying all these things and making these videos so that you can go back and watch again. And when I say certain things in our gathering or in class, then it's like, oh, I've heard you say that so many times, but I just heard you now say it for the first time. And some of you guys say those things actually, like, I've never heard you say that before. And I'm like, I say it every time we meet. You just heard it for the first time. So prime the pump, prime the pump. Trust me, trust yourself, trust this process. It's beautiful. Lastly, interior muscles, landscape. We've covered it basically, but and it's kind of what I was just saying. But there's a whole realm of interior muscles in the same way as exterior. You can say, pick up the coffee cup, and the hand goes and picks it up. I can say, turn and look that way, and the head looks that way. In the same way as I could say, drop the pin, you know how to drop the pin. Interiorly the same. How come we're not trained to say, in the same way as drop the pin, to say, drop that thought? Drop concepts of past and future. Let go of the ego. But this is exactly what's possible. This is exactly what I'm calling you to. And all of this is important to be guided and to do on your own. So it's like, don't rely on your personal trainer at the gym, because when something happens to him or her, then you go into the gym and you don't know what to do with yourself, right? You don't know how to do a workout on your own. So when you're using the recording of the technique, use it sometimes, or if you guys listen to HemiSync or binaural beats or different podcasts, use it sometimes, but imprint that reality or that feeling for yourself so that you can more easily remember your way back there. Just like you don't need a GPS in your car to get home. It's the same. Once you learn your way to yourself, you don't need a guide to get back there. And then it opens up entirely for you, customized for you. And that's why we're developing kind of a vibe, kind of a culture. You guys are listening to what I have to say. I'm not prescribing a lifestyle in like rules to follow. I do believe that it's important to have your compass, your navigation geared towards positive, towards light, towards love, towards benevolence, rather than the opposite. Because as you start to disidentify from conditioning, you want to still have appropriate habits in the positive, not the negative, not destructive or self-sabotaging or sabotaging of others. Want to be of service to others. But I'm not prescribing 10 commandments. These are the basics of being human, in my opinion. These are the basics of awakening yourself. and your natural essence comes back online, or comes online for the first time, or comes online for the first time in this life. So getting used to your interior world, your interior muscles, your interior landscape, rather than prioritizing the exterior only as real. It's all real and it's all an illusion. Even, take this with a grain of salt, even the interior is an illusion. The word Maya, I think it's a Sanskrit word, but Maya has come to mean illusion. The word Maya actually means measurement. So again, just like the persona, whoever first said it knew what they were referencing. So anything that has measurement from the ultimate sense is an illusion. It doesn't mean not real. It just means not lasting. Not something that you should ultimately identify with because it's coming and going. It has measurement. If it begins or ends in time or space on any dimension or layer, it's going to go one day. So tread lightly, hold loosely. So also thoughts on the interior are illusions, coming and going. They have measurements. One last thing I'd like to say, especially for you new folks, at our gatherings, we are cultivating a culture and a spirit of respect, holding each other in high regard, honor. Even if you come there with your partner and something comes up, good. That's part of the work. It's all part of the work. There are equal parts of respect and freedom and allowing you to be yourself. You don't have to share if you don't want to. I'm not just going to get trigger happy and push your buttons and call you out. But at the same time, we do the work together. And we hold the container for each other. So everything is held in trust and safety. I put myself out on the cutting board, on the operating table for you guys to see. I make an example of myself often, raw and vulnerable. And that's not required. You don't have to, so don't let that scare you away, but just know it's a safe space. Also, it's not one of these spaces to come and share all your problems in order to reinforce them, but in order to move them, in order to shift them, in order to heal them, in order to see them in a different light, in order to get someone else's perspective in the context of this work, in order to get yourself reflected back to you so you can see it clearly. That's what we're doing. Healing, liberation. Healing, liberation. Healing, liberation. I'd like to sit here in a few minutes of silence with you guys. Just let everything I've said soak in. Let go of thinking, let go of concepts, let go of grasping, let go of holding on. Feel the naturalness of just being here. Everything else is a detail. True and pure awareness, pure being, pure consciousness, pure you. Just here, perfect in every way, already, always. Those are very spontaneous energy waves that come through this body sometimes, especially when I'm dropping into that kind of ultimate space. So just know that. Notice there is nothing required of you to be. You are already. All the suffering comes on top of it when you try to be something rather than this one thing, rather than this thing. You are already that. And there we are one. Not one as two united beings or people, but one without two. One as one that doesn't know itself in relation to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just one. Already one. Much love, peace, blessings. I look forward to continuing this journey. Thank you for being here on it with me. Namaste.